Welcome to The Screen Queen, the show where I'll be talking about your favorite TV show or your favorite movie. You'll just have to listen to find out. This is your host, Samantha Parrish. Hello there, and welcome back to The Screen Queen. This is your host on the East Coast, your Screen Queen, Samantha Parrish. So, Fatal Attraction. It's one hell of a film that makes someone question if they should have an affair and if they should even own a rabbit. Or meet Glenn Close. All the above. But this movie has the honor of being my first R-rated movie. I saw a snippet of this film when I was 6 years old, and there's a whole story about what happened there, about how I ended up watching this very intense psychological thriller. And over the years, there's a strange holdup for Fatal Attraction. It has been referenced numerously as this relic of the 80s, like of all things. Like there's so many films to choose from, but a psychological thriller from the 80s is kind of a rare award to have, that it is able to still be referenced to this day, and to have a reboot on Paramount Plus that I have not seen yet, but at some point I will. And we'll also be talking about that as well for the compare and contrast for what they've done. So hide your wives, hide your rabbits, because we are getting into Fatal Attraction. So I want to start this episode with the craziest story that happened in this crazy movie. So this is a minor spoiler if you haven't seen Fatal Attraction. But near the end of the film, when Alex is finally just cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and she is about to kill Dan's wife just to have Dan. Like, she is, like, far beyond help. She is absolutely insane in her obsession with Dan. And this is a very applaudable thing of what Glenn Close did to just do these crazy stunts with Michael Douglas. I mean, we're talking she gets thrown into a mirror, she gets thrown into a bathtub, she gets tossed around, she gets choked in a bathtub. And, you know, gotta commend Glenn Close for her tenacity to do everything to create the craziness for this character and to make this very intense ambiance. But after the scene was filmed, she's like, I'm not feeling too good. Maybe I worked too hard. And then she fainted. And she was rushed to the emergency room. Her husband was there. And she's trying to figure out, like, maybe I ate something. Maybe I worked too hard. What's going on? And the doctor tells her, oh, you're 5 weeks pregnant. That's why you fainted. And she's like, what? What? And then she's going through her mind like, oh my God, I got thrown into a wall. I got thrown into a bathtub. Is the baby okay? And she had no idea she was pregnant at all. It just never crossed her mind. And thankfully, she was told the baby is in good health and that it was just the overworking was a cause of her fainting. And the baby was delivered. No other problems happened. And that, to my knowledge, is the only child that Glenn Close had. But that's a hell of a story that her daughter was able to find out, like, what her mother was doing during pregnancy. Like, oh, I was getting thrown around by Michael Douglas, and I got drowned in a bathtub, and then I got shot, and that was all within 5 weeks of you being in my belly. Like, I wonder what her daughter's reaction was to hear that story of just, like, how did I survive? It was just, I guess you could say, it was just a close call. You are so welcome for that joke. But with Glenn Close being in the film, you can't not see anyone else as the role of Alex Forrest. She brings the kind of crazy you need to see, but like a layered crazy that Glenn Close gives to Alex Forrest. And in a strange way, in the years to come, with the way her career developed to do more projects and play more characters, and then in 9 years' time, she plays Cruella de Vil, the most famous character for mistreating puppies, and it's just like, I don't know, like, every character she plays, like, something's going on with her and animals, like, they're always in danger around her. It's terrible to say. But it's a funny, like, it's a very strange parallel that I see with the characters that she plays. In a way, with Glenn Close being in the film, it really is about her. She is the center of the film. She upholds the title Fatal Attraction. And it's hard to know what this film would have looked like without her, because originally the director, Adrian Lyne, didn't want anything to do with her in the film, and he actually said that Glenn Close is the last person that he would want for the film. When she was going to be the next to come in audition, he was like, no, don't send her in. She's completely wrong for the part. And then look what happened. She became the pinnacle part of the film that is still talked about years later. I mean, what's it, 2023 right now? So in 4 years, let's see here. So 37 years later, it still holds up, that you still feel your heart just go a million miles a minute, your lungs clenching when you see this woman walk in with a knife. I mean, that is a very rare villain that still feels as evil and horrifying as what you would see with a horror movie or other psychological thrillers. There are so many unique villains that we get, and Alex Forrest is one of them, to be able to be a whole new brand of villain that doesn't feel old and is a fresh new take on what is considered kind of like a film noir villain, like a villainous. And to this day, as I'm talking right now, Glenn Close is still approached by random people, and they say to her, after I watched you in Fatal Attraction, I never wanted to have an affair. Thank you so much for saving my marriage. She's still heard, thank you for saving my marriage, many times from many people. And she's like, thanks, I'm glad I helped. Awesome. It's funny as hell. I could go on about Glenn forever, but we do need to move on to other parts about this episode. So I'm going to put a little pause on Glenn and move on to the other amazing actors in this film. As much as Glenn Close does make the film, everyone else does give a solid performance. But it's hard to know what this film would have looked like if we didn't have some of the key players that we saw in the film. I mentioned how Glenn Close was just completely disregarded and dismissed and then ended up being the best part of the film. But it's hard to know what it would look like if we didn't have Michael Douglas as the titular role of Dan Gallagher. Originally, John Ritter, wholesome John Ritter, was going to be at the helm to play Dan Gallagher. Now, honestly, I could have seen that even though it didn't happen. This is a tiny little snippet I want to say about John Ritter, but he didn't really get a change in his career until 1990 when he did Problem Child. He was still doing the same kind of everyday Joe stuff going on and didn't dive into darker projects. And when he did, he was great. And knowing how great he is in darker projects, I would have wanted to see what he would have brought to Fatal Attraction, what kind of layers he could have done. Even though John Ritter does play on dark humor more to balance himself out in the certain films when he started to change and get a little edgier. But, Michael Douglas he brought something to this film. It could have been an easy playoff, just like, oh, Michael Douglas, it's all we need. Just, be you, Mike, it's all we need. But Michael Douglas did something in this film that truly made you feel for his character. It could have been so easy because he's a dude that did a bad thing in his marriage and now he's paying for it. And that could have just been the film, just watching him suffer. But we do get to see the way that he shows remorse for what he did and that was stupid for what he's done and what he's willing to do for his family. You really do feel the emotion driven by what Michael Douglas puts into Dan Gallagher for his mistake that is going to cost him a lot of things, including a rabbit. There was even something that I read about Michael Douglas and how much he gave to this performance that it accidentally scared the hell out of the young girl that played his on-screen daughter. Ellen Glatzen played Ellen Gallagher. And she's a very cute kid, and oh my god, you feel very bad for her in the film for how she's also affected by everything in the affair, even though she is unbeknownst to what's going on around her. And for a majority of some of the film where Michael Douglas's character had to be angry, she did witness that, and being 6 years old in that film, like, that's gonna be a little tricky to know, like, is this guy that I'm working with that's supposed to play my father really mad at me? And so it says here on IMDb, to get the desired reaction shot from Ellen during the scene where she witnesses her parents having an intense argument, Michael Douglas was behind the camera bullying Ellen Glatzen and threatening to take away the stuffed unicorn she was holding, saying, "Look at that stupid unicorn. I'm going to throw it in the garbage," which is why she begins crying and hugging it tighter. After director Adrian Lynn yelled, "Cut!" Douglas immediately apologized to her and said he was only kidding and hugged her. In an interview years later, Douglas stated, "I felt pretty guilty, but you've got to do what you've got to do." And knowing that, that's a bold, risky move, but Michael Douglas is not wrong. With children in the industry, there has to be a desired thing. And I think Michael Douglas really did play his cards right to know how he can yell at her without, psychologically scarring her. There are some kids that are, scarred for life for what they have seen in the industry or how they're treated. Look at fucking Jake Lloyd and what happened to him from Star Wars. And I do like the fact that Michael Douglas did go on to state, like, I feel bad about that, but I did what I had to do. Like, at least he said he felt bad and wasn't like, "Hey kid, brush it off, it's the industry, get in here." He knew about the fact that he's yelling at a 6-year-old. There's that empathy and sympathy involved with what he had to do. And with him being a parent, like, he's like, "Oh crap, this is terrible. I would hate it if it was my own child being yelled at," and I'm glad that he did treat Ellen as if she were his real daughter. And I believe Ellen Glatzen did later on talk about what her experience was like on Fatal Attraction in a podcast. Let me look it up real quick. I know it was around here somewhere where she did talk about it. Let's see here. Oh, it says right here. She produced her own podcast show called Watched about the child acting industry, where you can hear more about her stories about what it was like working on these films, and with the big pinnacle being Fatal Attraction. But with Fatal Attraction and how it's aged to be a film that didn't bite off more than it could chew, but it still did bring a huge question up years later. Did Fatal Attraction make a false representation of mental health? And that's a huge thing that you see with a lot of films that now that we're thinking about these days to rewatch them. I've mentioned a couple of films on here that have taken the approach to talk about mental health and being like a silent whistleblower. But Fatal Attraction is a whole new tune when it comes to depicting someone that clearly is mentally unstable. Like, could have it been possible that all of the actions that Alex Forrest did, could that have been avoided easily if she had gotten help? I'm going to read this to you. In a 2013 interview with CBS News, Glenn Close admitted that she would have rethought her portrayal of Alex Forrest because of her fear that the film's popularity may have been a contributing factor towards mental health stigma. "I would read that script totally differently," Close said. "The astounding thing was that in my research for Fatal Attraction, I talked to 2 psychiatrists. Never did a mental disorder come up. Never did the possibility of that come up. That, of course, would be the first thing I think of now." Glenn is 100% right. And that's the first thing we all think of these days. Anything I watch, anything that you watch, we're like, "Hey, wait a minute, that does not age well. What about getting help?" Usually in the 80s, like, therapy was kind of thought as like a last resort, or sometimes it was made fun of. It took a long time to get here. And Fatal Attraction was one of those films that it doesn't feel like it is giving a false representation. It's giving us a fictional story about a woman that's going too far to get what she wants. Because there are some people out there that do take things to a critical point to go murder someone because they didn't get who they wanted. But sometimes that can be stopped before that thought even comes up, to get appropriate help and figure things out, and that way something like Fatal Attraction would never happen in real life. But with that said, like I mentioned, it does happen in real life. it's a touch and go thing depending on what someone's mental health is like and what they are able to do for themselves. What is their friends like? What are their family like? There's a lot of layers that goes into understanding why someone did what they did, or what their next action would be, or how it can be stopped. Just like Glenn Close said, the first thing you think of now is having a mental health disorder to just cut it off before anything happened. Like, if Alex Forrest truly did get help in the first place, like after she had the affair, she probably would have been better off. She probably would have been okay. But there are two alternates to everything. And this was the alternate that we got, was the fact that Alex Forrest did pursue left and right to get what she wanted. She went through extreme verities to mess with Dan, calling his phone, picking up his child from school, making his wife go into a hysterics to find her child, coming into his house, attempting to kill his wife. These things do happen in real life. And Fatal Attraction is one of those fictional representations that you can still see as a fictional way, but you also do see this could be a future for someone if we don't monitor their mental health to prevent something like that. It's a film that still aged well, that still brings that question in a good limelight. Hopefully, I'm hoping that all made sense. Mental health is a huge thing for me. It's been known on the show a lot. And I hope I brought that justice to talk more about it. If you are suffering from any mental health problems, like, my heart goes out to you, and I'm proud of you for how you're able to push through everything and get yourself help, because help is the hugest thing you can do. It is the most courageous thing that you can do to fight against those urges and fight against intrusive thoughts and fight against taking a very heinous route. And we've come a long way from where people have probably been in that kind of Alex Forrest mental state to know that that's not the life for them, that they can get help. And I'm proud of you for your strides in mental health. And if you do need help or you're scared to get help, I do hope for the best that you are able to find the correct therapist that can mesh with your vibe and get you exactly what you need. Because, like I say, mental health is not a one-size-fits-all, and it takes a while until we find exactly what we need. Now, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next part of this episode, which is my story of how I watched Fatal Attraction. I have been dying to tell this story. No pun intended. So, picture it. The year is 2000 or 2001. I don't remember the exact year, but I remember how old I was. I was 6 years old. And I was in my mom's room playing with my Barbie dolls, and my mother was at her desk working on her computer, and we're both not paying attention to the TV. The TV is just basically background noise. Or so we thought. I just happened to look up, and I have no idea what I'm watching. It's way too advanced for me, but am I gonna not watch TV? No. I'm gonna investigate and see what's going on here. Whatever my 6-year-old mind can process. And I see this strange blonde woman coming into a bathroom. I have no idea what's going on. I'm just paying attention. And then the fight ensues between Ann Archer and Glenn Close, and my entire thought process during that scene was, I like that dress. I wish I had a white dress like that. I wish my Barbies had a white dress like that. Like, that's where my concern lied. And then things got really intense. That completely changed my focus when it started to get increasingly violent. And then Michael Douglas rushes in, of course, to save the day and save his wife from the woman he accidentally slept with. And he starts fighting off Glenn Close. And I'm just like, wow, this is very intense. My goodness, that's a giant knife. What's happening? And I don't feel anything like fearful or scared, or all I just thought was, this is bad. And, using my deduction skills that I have as a 6-year-old. And then finally, when Glenn Close gets shot, that's when my mom looked at the TV screen and then looked at me and realized that I was paying attention. And then that's when she got scared, thinking, did I get scarred? I shouldn't have seen that. no fault on my mom, because I had no idea what I was watching, so thankfully it didn't scar me, but that scene still lived in my mind, not knowing what I was watching, not knowing any title at all, until years later, when I saw the trailer for Fatal Attraction and realized that the actors looked recognizable, like I had seen them, didn't know where. And then, when I saw the scene, it all came back to me like Dory in Finding Nemo, like, oh, I remember this 11 years ago. And in a way, when we were younger, and we saw something that we were not allowed to watch, like that very first film is that rite of passage, that badge of honor, that we were able to watch something that was completely outside of the realm of what we were allowed to watch as kids. Like, I lived my life watching Barbie movies and Thomas the Tank Engine, and this was just a major plunge to see an entirely different story that I've never seen before in my life. And it still stayed with me until the day that I finally got to see it for myself. Just like there are many other people out there when they were kids, and they also had their own unique movie that it is unique to them for a specific reason. Like, there are so many films that I've watched in my life. There's so many TV shows I've watched in my life that are all equally special to me. You all have heard about a majority of my favorite movies, and Fatal Attraction is one of the most important movies to me, for it being that gateway film that's a part of my history that I can go back and tell the story about how I watched Fatal Attraction when I was 6 years old. It creates that story that forever lives with me that I get to tell people about. It's so fucking funny. One day I'll have to get my mom to tell the story about her side of everything, when she accidentally saw me watching something that I wasn't supposed to be watching, but she wasn't watching it either, and we both weren't really watching it, and then that just kind of was the unluck of the draw that was the scene that comes up. Like, everything else beyond that could have been totally okay, but it just had to be the awful coincidence, but it also was the best coincidence that I got to see that scene, and it forever lived with me and changed my life. So before I end this episode, I want to do a compare and contrast of the original Fatal Attraction and the remake series of Fatal Attraction. But I'm going to throw you a curveball. The Fatal Attraction I'm talking about is actually the first Fatal Attraction that was called Diversion. So this movie that I've been talking about, that came out in 1987, is a remake of the film called Diversion that came out in 1979. And this was a short film. This was only 39 minutes, so there was some room to work with before we got the longer remake of 1987's Fatal Attraction. So, I want to read the synopsis to you. Gary is a happily married man devoted to his wife, their kid, and the family dog. Oh God, I hope there's no rabbit in that. A weekend without the presence of his wife presents him a chance of getting involved in a casual encounter with a pretty woman he met some time ago. Things go quite well, but the woman isn't interested in Gary for just a one-night stand. Oh dear. There's a lot of room there. So that came out in 1979, and I'm not really seeing anyone that's, like, familiar to me. I just see a guy named Stephen Moore, Sherry Lungi, Morag Hood. That's interesting. I've never heard of those people before in my life. Okay. Well, the director was a guy named James Dearden, who, well, he hasn't really done anything that I would recognize, but that man is still credited as the man who had the whole story of a man having a one-night stand, and it goes to hell in a handbasket when she wants more than just a one-night stand. She wants him. So without him, we wouldn't have the remake of Fatal Attraction, or having the other remake of Fatal Attraction. That's the next one I'll talk about before we get to the TV series. So there is a remake that came out after the remake of Fatal Attraction. This hurts my brain and my tongue to say that so much. I hope everyone's following along. I'm trying my best with what I can do. So, the second remake of Fatal Attraction, let's just say that, is a film called, oh dear God in heaven, I hope I can pronounce this. Extricatrathitu. I am so sorry. I am Extricathitu. Hopefully, I don't know if that made sense. That was hard to say. But it is a, I think I want to say it's an Indian film, like, kind of like Bollywood film. It says here, Prakash is married to Sumati, and they have a son and seem to live a perfect life. Trouble ensues when Renuka Menon, a widow, enters his life, and he struggles to be faithful. That's interesting, having the titular villainous character, the Alex Forrest-like character, to be a widow, when originally what we know about Alex Forrest in the only version we know of Fatal Attraction, the popular one where Alex Forrest is just there, she wants to have kids, she has a very energetic lifestyle, but she wants Dan. And just like with this remake right here I just told you about, he's struggling to be faithful, and things are probably going to go to hell in a handbasket very soon. And then we have the Fatal Attraction remake series on Paramount Plus. So here we go. So the synopsis for this: a deep dive reimagining of the classic 80s thriller exploring timeless themes of marriage and infidelity through the lens of modern attitudes towards strong women, personality disorders, and coercive control. Now, with that said, earlier I mentioned about how Glenn Close really analyzed the mental health aspects of her character that wasn't brought up to prevent her character from doing what she did. And now Fatal Attraction is taking what was said there of the obvious factor of, well, this woman needs help. We need to mention that. That can't just be just dismissed and tossed off to the side like it would have been in 1987. I mean, shit, like Glenn Close said, two psychologists never mentioned that. I want to see what team of psychologists were here for this TV series. I can imagine there's a lot that dived into that. So, from what I remember in the trailer, it does take a different spin. And stay with me for this, because it does parallel what could have happened in the original Fatal Attraction. So, for the remake, the story goes that the character Dan Gallagher is arrested for the murder of Alex Forrest. And he has to prove his innocence, and he has to say what he did, and what he did with her, and what things they did, and the stuff after that, and how it all came back to bite him in the ass. And to open up the trailer with him in handcuffs, beard, everything, like, there's probably been a lot of time behind bars, and the story was not said because it probably got dismissed of, like, well, dude, you killed a woman. But it probably didn't turn out to be like that. We all know Dan Gallagher is a character that has made a mistake, just like the one in 1987, the one that was in Diversion, the one in that remake that I struggled to say. That's always been echoed, but there's a stronger echo because this specific version of Dan Gallagher probably comes from the original ending that Fatal Attraction had before they did the intense ending. Not many people know this, that the original ending to Fatal Attraction was going to be darker and quieter. It sounds strange to say that, but when I paint the picture for you, you'll understand. So, the way that Fatal Attraction originally ended was the police coming to Dan's house to say that Alex Forrest has been murdered. And he's like, I know her, but I don't have anything to do with that. And they're like, well, why are your fingerprints on the knife that was used to slit her throat? And he's like, what? He's just flabbergasted. And even at this point, like, his wife believes him, knowing that he was there the entire time. There's no way that he killed her. Well, and the police are like, well, your fingerprints are on the knife. We gotta do our job. Plot's gotta plot. We're gonna arrest you. And so, Beth is struggling to figure out a way how she can be able to prove her husband's innocence. And there is a voice recording left on the telephone. And it is Alex saying that she's going to die, she's going to kill herself, and Beth immediately takes that answering machine tape out. She grabs Ellen, grabs her car keys, and she runs down to the station And you know everything from there that she's going to prove that her husband did not kill Alex. And then we are shown a scene of Alex in her home by herself, and I don't think I have to tell you what she did. And that's the way Fatal Attraction ended. And that's what we did not have. And we opted for the much intense ending of Alex actually getting killed by Dan when he's saving his wife from Alex. And, you know, it's a much better ending, and I'm glad that we still went through with that. Otherwise, there would be nothing for a 6-year-old for me to see and to later think about later on in life. Many for other, and the same thing for other people too that have watched the film that have never been able to forget that ending. However, it does make a lot of sense that it is an alternative that would happen, and they do show that alternate of what would happen. They basically stretch out that deleted scene into an entire series. That's pretty impressive. I can't exactly confirm that for sure, but that's just my theory from what I've seen in the trailer and knowing that original ending. Like, there's no way this is not a reference to the original ending of Fatal Attraction. But it'll be interesting when I can finally have a day to sit down and watch the series and see how they made Fatal Attraction in 2023, now that we have mental health messages, and now that times have changed since the 80s, and there are a lot more fair things involved with a story like Fatal Attraction, that a lot of those layers can finally be explored. That yes, they were explored back in the 80s where we had a longer version of Diversion, but still Fatal Attraction had the makings of going a little bit farther. And I wonder how far the TV series took it with how far we've come. The one thing I hope is, well, let's hope no rabbits end up having a grisly fate in this one, but you never know. It is called Fatal Attraction after all. So, that is officially a wrap on the Fatal Attraction episode. This was very fun to do, despite the fact that this was kind of a heavy episode with what had to be talked about. But it was nice to revisit one of the core movies of my life that made me who I am today. So this was quite a historical episode to have on there, and I'm glad I got to share the story that I've been telling people for years, and now I got to have it on the show. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for always taking the time out of your day to listen to these episodes and continue to come back every Sunday for more. I'm very proud to be the host of this show, and I'm very proud to have an audience that has always been listening to these episodes. I check the downloads all the time to see who's been listening and what episodes are being listened to, and it's wonderful that I get to be a part of someone's day. That's really cool. It's very, very cool. Thankfully, you won't see me like Alex Forrest, standing in your bathroom with a knife and a crazed look. Like, that'll never happen, thank God. But anyway, now is the time to find out what the next episode is going to be on The Screen Queen. So, here we go. So, if you are new to the show, hello, welcome. You have come in on a very monumentous episode. I have a system where we never know what the next episode is going to be on The Screen Queen, including me. I have a whole bunch of random TV shows and movies in a box, and I mix it up, and then we both find out together. It's a very special moment for us, and I love that. So here we go. Alrighty. Let me mix this up really good. Alrighty. I got one from the bottom. What are you? Aw, damn. Okay. Alrighty. It's about time I go back and watch this movie again. So the next episode on The Screen Queen is going to be Coco. I know a lot of people probably just got a little misty-eyed when I mentioned that name, and well, I hope you got your tissue boxes ready for the next episode as we dive into one of the most amazing Pixar movies ever made. That's a high feat, and I saw what people were talking about, and we're going to dive into that on the next episode. If you'd like to catch up with me in between uploads to shoot me a movie or TV show recommendation, if you just want to say hi, you can find me on my Instagram at The Queen of the Screen. If you would like to see some funny movie-related content, you can find me on my TikTok at The Mystical Space Witch. And if you're interested in seeing what my book series Inglorious Inc. is all about, you can find that in the description box. Alrighty, well, thank you again for listening to the episode. Take care, stay amazing, look out for your rabbits. This is your host, signing off. Bye-bye!